Right, ready to go? Cool. Welcome to the virtual meeting of North Tyneside Council's Finance Subcommittee, following the recent introduction of regulations to allow remote meetings in light of the current coronavirus pandemic. My name is Councillor Anthony McMullen, and I'm the chair of this subcommittee. I would like to inform everyone that this meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel to enable the public to observe the proceedings, and I welcome anyone who is watching. Before we move on to the agenda, I would like to make it clear who is participating in the meeting and explain how we intend to conduct the meeting. In order to check who is attending the meeting, I would like to ask everyone present to confirm their attendance at the meeting. First of all, I will call out the names of each committee member. After I call your name, please turn on your microphone and camera and introduce yourself. So starting with Councillor Debbie Cox. After I call your name,
thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Debbie Cox. I'm from Conwood Ward. I'm Deputy Chair of the committee.
Councillor Naomi Craven.
Good evening, Chair. If it's all right with you, I'll leave my camera off because it's broken and I'll look like an Andy Warhol painting. But I'm Councillor Naomi Craven, Monk Seaton South Ward.
Right, no problem. Councillor John O'Shea.
Good evening. My name's John O'Shea and I'm a councillor from the Whitley Bay Ward.
I don't believe I've got John Sterling in attendance. So Councillor Paul Richardson.
Hello, yes, excuse me. Hello, yeah, Paul Richardson, councillor for Monk Seaton North.
Okay. And Councillor Judith Wallace.
Hello, I'm Judith Wallace, councillor for St Mary's Ward.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can I now ask officers in attendance to introduce yourselves, stating your name and job role? After I call your name, please turn on your microphone and camera and introduce yourself. So starting with Janice Gillespie.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Janice Gillespie. I'm Head of Resources and Chief Finance Officer.
Thank you. Claire Emerson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Claire Emerson, Senior Manager, Financial Strategy and Planning.
Thank you. Kathy Davison, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Kathy Davison, Principal Accountant from the Finance Service.
Thank you. David Dunford.
Thank you, Chair. David Dunford, Senior Business Partner for Finance.
Thank you. Tracy Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Tracy Hunter and I'm the Client Manager for Revenues, Benefits and Customer Services.
Thank you very much. Andrew Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the Senior Manager, Andy Scott, Senior Manager for Revenues, Benefits and Customer Services.
Thank you. Paul Wheeler.
Hi, Chair. I'm Paul Wheeler, Ex Services.
And Ian Betham.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ian Betham. I'm the Senior Manager within the Council's Strategic Investment and Property team.
Okay. Is there anybody who I've missed?
Councillor Glendon's in the meeting, Chair.
Okay. So Councillor Glynn, the Cabinet Member for Finance, and I believe we've got Michael Robertson doing the broadcast. Concludes everyone on the list. For today's meeting, we must first deal with some formalities, i.e. the apologies of absence, declarations of interest, and confirmation of minutes. The agenda papers contain 4 reports for this meeting. I will take each of the reports in turn in the order they appear on the agenda, which has been published on the Council's website. For each of the reports, I will ask the relevant officer to introduce the item. I will then ask members of the committee if they have any questions, and then I will also ask if the members wish to make any comment on the report. In terms of etiquette, please can I just remind everybody that they should mute their microphones and turn off their video unless they are speaking. So that brings us on to item number 1, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
No, Chair, there's no apologies.
Okay. I take it then for item 2, if there's no apologies for absence, there are no substitute members.
That's correct, Chair.
That brings us on to item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest of any item of business upon the agenda? Okay, that's a no. Then we shall move on to item 4, which is minutes. Can I ask the minutes of the last meeting held on the 11th of February 2020 be approved as a current record. Actually, I think that's the wrong date.
That's the wrong date.
So of the most recent meeting then, my apologies.
Agreed.
It's the 15th of September. 15th of September, Chair.
Thank you. I thought it was a lot more recent than that.
Still agreed.
Brilliant.
Agreed.
Thank you for that. So that brings on item 5, the 2021 Financial Management Report. Can I ask Janice Gillespie to present this report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the second budget monitoring report that takes us at the period of the 31st of July with a forecast up to the end of March. I have to say that seems like such a long time ago. Basically what the report does, in line with our first report, is set out that the forecast monitoring position based on a suite of assumptions around what we call business as usual for the general fund in terms of activity that continues outside of those activities impacted by COVID, and also what we've demonstrated are the costs and implications that we saw them at that time in respect of COVID. The report sets out very clearly the implications for the general fund and the housing revenue account, and there is an update on the school's funding. Included in the report, I'm just scrolling down on a separate page, is an update on the implications for the collection fund. So what we're trying to demonstrate there is the picture around potential impacts on council tax and business rates to give members a clearer position on the performance affected by COVID on those particular areas. And also a report on the investment fund in terms of delivery at the end of July and a forecast position at year end. And I'm happy to take the usual questions in the format as the chair prefers.
Brilliant. So normally we go through section by section and see if there's any questions. And if we miss anything out, we can mop them up at the end. So is there anything you want to jump in already, John? Or do you, is that on the first section?
Chair, I was wanting to ask a couple of questions, but I haven't got any page numbers. Shall I wait till the end of the presentation, or shall I jump in now?
If we can just, I'll just go through the sections first. Then at the end, I'll bring you back in case we're picking them up through the sections.
Thank you.
This helps people find them in the papers. Okay, so starting at section 1, which is on page 22. Are there any questions within section 1? So it's quite good to see the business as usual variance being where it is, despite hex being a little bit off the mark. But I think that's probably with the thing we held in reserves rather than it being.
Yeah, that's right. Contingencies are in central items. Yeah.
Getting the hang of this. So of which the COVID risk there is 10.6.
Yeah.
Which is the majority of our variance, which, whilst not a brilliant news story, is still a news story.
It is, yes.
Well, so if there's nothing on section 1, section 2, delivery of budget savings proposals. Nope. Section 3, new revenue grants. Hear that? Section 4, our service commentaries. No, it's quite a big section. I'll give some people time in case they've got a corner marked somewhere. Sure, I've got one marked somewhere. I've got one on page 38. No one else has anything. The stats for looked after rate per 10,000 children. The last update it was 2018. Is there any new data, or is it just the cogs that take that long to update? I know we're waiting for other people's data.
Which?
So it's chart 5. 4.2.31.
I think we will chase that up, Chair, because I'd be surprised if we couldn't add 2019 now. So we'll pick that up as an action.
Thank you. We'll flip through some more pages. Anyone in that section want to shout up with a question? That's fine. Not seeing any hands go up. I am multitasking and flipping pages at the same time, so might miss something. No. Okay, so once again, the next section, section 5, the collection fund. No. Section 6, schools finance. Was the interesting thing on there being table 31 with the schools expected deficit positions. Some of them seem to be on whilst they're in deficit, seem to be on some sort of positive trajectory. Yeah. And I know you guys focus right on there with the deficit clinics to try and mitigate and minimize that as much as possible. Just wonder if there's something in there to say you've got is that what we mean by structural deficit, where we know it's going to be that and it's going to be that for a while? I'm just trying to work out if they're going in the right direction and not necessarily in the right direction, if there's something that we mentioned in there.
Yeah. Claire, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, absolutely. So the term structural deficit relates to what's in our scheme for finance in schools. All schools are required to submit a 3-year budget plan, and if they aren't able to submit a 3-year budget plan which shows them coming back into financial balance within that time scale, that the classed as being a structural deficit school. So clearly Monks Eaton High School and Norham High School are those schools that we are currently working with, but they haven't been able to submit a budget plan that shows that position. So that's where that term comes from. So
that I think that's describing what I'm wanting the column to tell me, which is it's actually telling me what I wanted to tell me, which is great. So in deficit means within 3 years they're expecting not to be in deficit, and structural deficit says they're not going to hit that target. At this time.
So at this point in time, we only have 2 schools of the schools who are currently in deficit who aren't anticipating that they'll be out of deficit.
Cool, thank you.
No problem.
The column I want you to make, you've already made it. Now I understand it. Brilliant, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Is there anything more on schools finance? Then we'll move over to housing revenue account, which is section 7. Oh yes, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on 7.7, it mentions about rent arrears and the impact has risen in the first 2 months for 2021. With COVID being such a massive impact on families' lives and everything else, do we know if this is to do with that, or is it just a general trend of an increase in rent arrears? Thank you.
I think, Chair, what we're seeing is an increase. We have seen a higher increase at that point in time as a result of the COVID impact. So I think what it's trying to demonstrate is that the arrears have grown a little bit more than this time last year.
Would I be presuming that I'm stealing a bit of Andy's thunder, expecting that will be mentioned somewhere in the next report about welfare?
Absolutely.
Reform?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Andy Scott, I can see your hands up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Tracy's actually doing the presentation on the welfare reform, but just to confirm that it certainly has some impact on it in terms of numbers of people on universal credit, and to add to it that we refrained from doing recovery action in the first part of the financial year during the initial lockdown to try and support our residents. So that's why rent arrears went up a little bit, because we weren't pursuing it with some recovery information.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's great when we've got a team together I can call upon. It's great. Anything more on housing revenue account? No? Okay, then that gets us on to section 8, the investment plan. Nothing. Okay, section 9, treasury management and the cash position. Always find that really interesting. I'm weird like that. Okay. Oh, yeah, there we go. Councillor O'Shea. Yep.
Yeah. Can I do my 2 questions now, Chair?
Yes.
Okay. The first one is around COVID, and I know our public health people in North Tyneside have been having challenging times, and I know that the government has given some grant allocations to North Tyneside to cover some of the public health issues. But I was just wondering if Mrs. Gillespie could tell me, because I seem to remember that the public health grant, it's a grant, over the last 2 or 3 years has been cut back quite substantially. I'm just wondering if you could give me a rough estimate of how much has been lost in the public health grant, let's say for the last 2 or 3 years up until March 20.
Okay.
I have a second question.
Okay. Yes, up until 1920. So in the 3 years up to 1920, there was an annual reduction in the public health grant. So we started prior to the reduction in 1718, we had just over 13 million in the public health grant. And by the time we got to 1920, there was just over 12 million. So there was about £1 million taken out of the grant over a 3-year period. That said, for 2021, there was a small increase, and that was to recognise the agenda for change pay costs. So it wasn't if you like, a generic increase. It was to recognise the subsequent increases that service provision would be needed to be delivered through the public health grant.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Mrs. Gillespie. Can I do my second one now, Chair?
You may, yeah.
Right. This is around school meals. And I know the government has now done a new turn and is going to provide funding to local authorities around free school meals during the holidays up until 31st of March. But the recent half-term holiday in October, there seemed to be a bit of an issue. And I heard 2 stories, and I'm just wondering if Mrs. Gillespie could tell me which one is correct. The first one I heard from the Prime Minister telling everyone that local authorities had been given money already to provide free school meals for the holiday in October. And I heard somewhere else that that wasn't part of the deal. And I'm just wondering, that was another local authority was saying they didn't see that that funding in one of the grants given to the council. So I'm just wondering, could Mrs. Gillespie just perhaps clarify that issue as to whether we got money for the October half-term free school meals or not? Thank you. Okay.
My understanding is we didn't get funding for the October holidays, and the prior to that period over the summer, the schools were given the funding directly to provide the support on school meals during that period, which, yes, were provided by our services, but there was no funding at that stage provided for the October holidays. And the authority used the poverty intervention fund that was set up as part of the budget setting process, and some provision was given through that particular scheme by the authority for the October half term. In terms of where we are currently today, we've had the announcement during last week on the winter funding, the winter hardship funding to support those families that are struggling with provision of meals in the school holidays, and indeed to support them and pay other bills. So we are currently working through defining that scheme and how it's going to work in practice. We've got around £644,000, but that's to take us through to the 31st of March. So that will cover the Christmas holiday break and then the half term in February. And the only other date that I need to clarify, because I haven't got children anymore in North Tyneside schools, is quite where Easter falls in terms of the Easter break, and whether that falls in 2021 or entirely in 21-22. But that's my understanding of the current funding situation of that.
Thank you, Mrs. Gillespie, for that clarification. Thank you.
Councillor Wallace. You might be still muted. There we go.
Chairman. On section 9, the Treasury management report, I'm wondering if you could tell how much the council has saved in borrowing costs and interest costs, given the very, very low rates at the moment, please?
So how much has the council saved in interest costs and loan costs due to the lower interest rates? Just to confirm, because you cut out, that was all.
Yeah, that's helpful because I missed part of that question. I'm just scrolling through because I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if Kathy knows off the top of my head, off of her head, sorry. I'm just looking in central items.
Just scrolling through as well.
It's about 1.3 million. Which is a mixture of, there's a saving included in corporate items in paragraph 4.9.5 on page 57. So we have got savings, I guess, as a result of that overall Treasury management activities. Some of that's because we've got, we had higher than forecasted cash balances at the time, at the end of July, but absolutely some of that is about favourable interest rates and an element of reprogramming. So it's a mixture of all those things, Councillor Wallace.
Okay, thank you. So that's 1.3 million in the year to date, or up to the 31st of July?
That was forecast to the year end based on our understanding of the position at the 31st of July. So it was a forecast taking it to the end of the year at that point in time.
That's fine, thank you.
Are there any additional questions, Judith?
No, that's it, thanks.
Brilliant, no worries. So I believe we're at the end of that report. Is there any further questions or comments that anybody wishes to make at this time? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no.
Oh, got Councillor Richardson's put his hand up, Chair.
Has he? Oh, yep, sorry. Councillor Richardson.
Well spotted, thank you. It's made, okay, I just wasn't clear how to read this piece of information. Come almost back to the beginning, the bottom paragraph on page 11 in the executive summary.
Yeah. Which paragraph, sorry?
The last paragraph on page 11, and so the 1, 2, 4,
right.
The fourth paragraph in the summary.
Yeah. So what we
go on.
Yeah. What that's just telling you is that at that point in time, we'd had two of the key grants from central government of 12.5 million.
Yeah.
But some of that related to 1920, so there was 733,000 of that 12.5 million related to the previous financial year, was spent in the previous financial year.
Okay.
And then in addition to that 12.5 million, at the time of writing this report, another 1.7 million had been announced.
Brilliant, that's okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I hadn't made the distinction between the financial years.
Yeah, yeah.
Good. Thank you very much.
Cool. Any further questions? Feel like an auctioneer about saying all in, fair one. Okay, cool. In that case, I shall conclude item 5 and ask members to note the report.
Agreed.
Great.
Thank you. Item 6, the welfare reform financial update. Can I ask Tracy Hunter to present the report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for receiving the financial update on welfare reform. The report follows its usual format and covers discretionary housing payments, local council tax support, local welfare provision and universal credit. I'm happy to take questions that anybody might have as we go through the report. So as the report outlines, discretionary housing payments provide much needed financial support towards rent shortfalls and moving costs. This year has been very different, and since April, take-up has been much lower than what we've seen in previous years, and the spend is lower too. Table 1 at point 305 of the report shows the current available funding at the point the report was written. Now, I've looked at this morning and this is reduced, and we have about £286,000 remaining in the fund. that is still 50% of the fund that we were provided in April by DWP, so there's still quite a lot of that fund available. The reduced take-up in the first 2 quarters of 2021 is likely to be down to the softer approach the council has taken around pursuing arrears. We've only just recently started the process of starting to issue arrears to tenants. And often tenants won't pursue support or additional funding if they're not being pursued for the debt that they actually have. So we do think that has had some impact on the number of people who are claiming discretionary housing payments. So because of this, and because we've started to issue the arrears letters, we're now anticipating that the take-up of discretionary housing payment will gather momentum over the next few months and until the final quarters. Housing are also looking at doing some targeted campaigns to improve take-up of discretionary housing payment. We've also advertised discretionary housing payments in the Residents magazine, and we've also done some promotion with the community and voluntary sector to improve take-up in that way as well. So I think it's just something that we are going to have to monitor as we go along and, adjust how we deal with things as things pan out over the next 2 quarters of the financial year. But we will make sure, because as you're aware, discretionary housing payments, if it's not spent, it goes back to DWP. So we will ensure that the fund is spent. Does anybody have any questions at that point before I move on to the second part of the report?
Anyone have any questions to do with DHP? I have just one. The rent arrears letter you sent out, does that have a call to action to use the DHP or think about using DHP or a leaflet or something in it that points in that way?
Yeah, I don't think it's specific around discretionary housing payment, but I think what it says is that if you're having some hardship, then please contact and we'll look at what other funds are available. Okay. So it might be discretionary housing payment is the right thing for that individual, or it might be some other funding that the council has. We have welfare provision and things like that. So if people contact, we can look at a whole holistic view of that individual, just to make sure that we're giving them the right support at the right time.
Cool. Because the last thing is a scary letter without the support arm on, which I'm sure you guys would have already had covered, but I just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Cool. If there's no other questions on DHP, let's go to Council Tax Support Scheme.
Okay then. Well, council tax support has been a very different picture this year compared to previous years, very different to DHP. The pandemic and the impact that it's had on businesses has led to more people claiming benefits or working on reduced hours and therefore needing to claim council tax support to help with their council tax bill. The first 2 quarters of this year have seen increases significantly both in caseload and cost. But what we have seen in the last month or so, that this has started to level off. We did anticipate that the cost of the scheme would continue to rise throughout the remainder of this year, as the furlough scheme was originally due to end in October, so we expected more people to be claiming benefits and therefore claiming council tax support. However, as the furlough scheme has been extended, we've seen the number of claimants in October remain very similar to that of September. So that's a really positive thing, because we did expect it to just increase month on month until the end of the financial year. So the fact that the furlough scheme has been extended has really been some positive news. The thing that we do with council tax support, as with discretionary housing payment, is that it's monitored really closely, so that we will pick up on any emerging trends as they appear for the remainder of the year, and then we can adjust, what support that we've got there.
Cool. So any questions on that? No? Okay.
Okay, part of the report covers hardship. Now, as you'll be aware, earlier in the year we got a £2 million hardship fund, and we've used that in line with what government guidance wanted, and that meant that all working age claimants of council tax support received up to £150 in support. This has left around £450,000 remaining in the fund. What we've done with that is we've provided housing with £100,000 to help tenants who've fallen into financial difficulty paying their rent, so that they can help them where there isn't any other funding available. So what we would be tapping into first would be the discretionary housing payment fund. Then if that wasn't appropriate for individuals, we would be looking to that council tenants would be able to utilise some of the £100,000 that we've given them out of the hardship fund. That still leaves us quite a lot of money, and we are using the remaining funding in different ways, including those that have had to self-isolate but who don't qualify for a payment. So those people who have had to stay at home for 2 weeks but and have lost income, but unfortunately they don't fall within the criteria of the test and trace support payments. So we've been able to help people through that hardship fund in those circumstances. Any questions before I move on to welfare provision?
Councillor O'Shea has a question.
Yeah. You mentioned in the report about.
You may have to mute. Tracy wants to ask the question.
Oh, sorry.
You mentioned in the report about the furlough scheme being extended, I think, until next March. But support for small businesses, there are people who are falling through the cracks and getting no support at all. Is the hardship fund a potential opportunity for people to fall through the cracks of getting government support anywhere, for them to apply for hardship funding?
The outline that we got around hardship didn't mean that we were able to use that for that thing, that kind of support for businesses. It was more around individuals. But I do believe that there are further grants that Andy Scott probably will be able to give you more detail on. That's been launched just recently, and obviously there was the grants at the beginning of the year, but Andy will be able to give you some more information around the current grant allocation.
He's eagerly got his hand up, ready to answer. Thanks.
Thank you for that response.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Tracy's quite correct in terms of the hardship funds really aimed at residents around council tax support and rent arrears, but we do have a number of grants available for support with businesses, and that includes people who are self-employed in different areas. There's specific grants for people in the hospitality leisure sector, but we also have what's called additional restrictions grant of £4 million to help other people, other businesses that are struggling financially, and that's a discretionary scheme. We'll be looking at the criteria of that very shortly in terms of trying to support all our business community.
Okay.
Yes, Chair. Thank you very much for that response, Tracy and Andy. Is there any likelihood, if perhaps self-employed people who are falling through the cracks of not getting any government support, around some kind of, if it is possible to give them some financial support, is there any possibility of some kind of media campaign just to advise people that this funding support is available from North Tyneside Council?
Yes, we'll be doing all that. We're actually promoting the business grants. We'll be going live later this week, and I know certainly John Sparks and Sean Collier's team have been working with many of our colleagues across the region. There is some support from government around self-employed, but you're quite right, it doesn't cover every eventuality. But I think for both residents and businesses, we look at the suite of opportunities we've got to provide support, to see what grants we've got and other funds, so anybody can approach the council, and they're actively encouraged that. Certainly the businesses are through the Chamber of Chamber of Trade and the other organisations across North Tyneside. So we welcome inquiries from our business community and then look at every avenue of support we've got to try and support them.
I'll conclude that section of hardship, and we can go on to local welfare provision.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Welfare provision. So as expected, the number of applications has increased this year compared to previous years by around 30%. We've had 714 applications, and each of those have received full screening to ensure that they're receiving all the benefits and awards that they're actually entitled to. So we take a whole holistic approach around the individual and look at making sure that they're getting absolutely everything that they're entitled to. In addition to that screening, around 50% have also received immediate practical support in the form of food parcels, utility bill top-ups and things like that. We still make referrals to the credit union for affordable loans, but take-up is really low. The credit union have put on a new online application. We're hoping that people will make use of that and try and access affordable loans. In addition to that, we also got in July £239,000, which was announced, and we're using that to support individuals and organisations who support our most vulnerable residents. We'll continue to receive grant requests from the community voluntary sector, and officers are reviewing these on a weekly basis so that we can give decisions very quickly and utilise that support for our community voluntary sector. Does anybody have any questions around welfare provision or the additional funding that we got from government?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, then I'll move on to the final part of the report, which was universal credit. As we expected, the number of universal credit claimants has increased from the last report, and we now have over 4,000 council tenants claiming universal credit. We touched on this earlier on in the evening around arrears, and almost 71% of universal credit tenants are in arrears. This is less than what we reported in the last quarter's report. And the other good news is that the average arrears for a universal credit claimant has also reduced to 559. So this is really good news. However, this is still higher than what the average arrears are for council tenants as a whole, which is around £500 per tenant. Since March, we've had over 1,000 tenants have moved on to universal credit. And around 40% of those have told us that they have been impacted by COVID-19 in one way or another. So staff are really working hard to try and support tenants in whatever way that we can.
Cool. Any further questions? Or any questions that you've missed and just remembered now? Councillor O'Shea, then we'll do Councillor Wallace afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, mention was made earlier of the intervention fund, which is coming on stream this financial year. I'm wondering if it would be appropriate that perhaps we might have a section in this type of report for future meetings about spend on the innovation fund, or alternatively, a separate report. You may want to discuss that with Mrs. Gillespie, but it would be interesting to know how the intervention fund is being used.
Yeah, we can certainly bring back that as either part of this report or the next monitoring report. We'll pick that up outside the meeting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to me. Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Chairman. It was the section about universal credit. Obviously, it's really good that the claims are all being processed very quickly and are up to date. But I was wondering about the section 3.26, where it says about the availability of coaching, work coaches, which are on offer, but that is voluntary. I'm just wondering if the officers have any indication of how many people take that up. What sort of percentage of universal credit claimants take up the offer of the assistance that's available? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Yes, I think we asked the job centre managers around this, and it's not something that they monitor. I think what they said was they may monitor this in the future, and I'll certainly pick this up again with our liaison manager to see if this is something that they did. But I think it was raised, and what they said, it was just something that they didn't do at the time. I don't know whether it was because there was so many new universal credit claims and there was so many to monitor, but I'll certainly pick that up with our job centre managers to see if this is something that they have been able to embed now.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. So final call for questions. Is there any more? No? Brilliant. Can I ask members to note this report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Brilliant. That then brings us on, thank you very much, Tracy, brings us on to item 7, the Section 106 update report, which I believe Ian Betham is going to present.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I understand that following the last meeting in September, members of the committee asked for a further report that provided a greater understanding on the Section 106 arrangements. The briefing note and the appendices that have been circulated have provided an overview of the planning obligations under the Section 106 arrangements. The Section 106 agreements are a mechanism which make a development proposal acceptable in planning terms and are focused on mitigating the impact of a development in a particular area. This can include improvements such as highways, sport and leisure and education. The briefing note provided outlines the arrangements that have been put in place since spring 2019 through the Investment Programme Board to ensure that the authority's Section 106 spend and project delivery are aligned with policy priorities and our ambition for North Tyneside for all areas of the borough. Officers continue to engage with local ward members as part of the process prior to any projects or proposals being presented to the Investment Programme Board for consideration. Additional management of this process has also been strengthened through the appointment of a dedicated Section 106 Capital Programme Officer who sits within the Strategic Investment and Property team under Mark Longstaff as the head of service. The post holder appointed works closely with all service areas across the council to help develop projects and support delivery. The briefing note provided highlights some of the work that has been done to date, including the establishment of the place sites and allotment strategies shown at appendices 1 and 2, and also providing information on such projects that have been delivered, such as the Risington Sports Ground, the Burton Recreation Ground, and also supporting affordable housing. Information has also been provided detailing the final contributions which are linked to both the Section 106 allocated monies, that's money that has been received by the authority, which is shown at Appendix 3, and Section 106 pipeline monies. This is monies not yet received as it may link to planning permissions which have not commenced or may not happen, and they are summarised at Appendix 4. The Section 106 allocated monies within the briefing note totals £8.9 million, and that has been broken down within the briefing note into the specific areas such as education, highways, health, sport and leisure, green infrastructure and play, recreation and community, employment initiatives and culture. Clearly, in the information that's been provided by myself and members of the team, there's a lot of detail within the appendices and indeed the briefing note. I hope that the information that has been shared with the committee tonight gives assurance to members that the necessary arrangements are in place to support the borough-wide Section 106 agreements. I'm happy, Chair, to take questions from the committee. Hopefully between myself and Cathy we'll be able to deal with any queries that come out, but if there's any specific queries on a service area, what I can do is refer that back to the service and then pick that up at a later date and get the information back to yourself.
Oh, I feel there'll be a flurry of questions. I'm going to start with Councillor O'Shea. You're not audible. There you go.
I'm okay there?
You are now, yes.
Mr. Betham, I'll just repeat the question I asked before the meeting commenced about the page 55, the top item there. It goes back to a planning application from 2000. And I was just wondering if you could find out a little bit more about what is actually going to happen to that funding, which has been lying around a little while. And overleaf on page 56, the sixth one from the bottom, I'm being very parochial here. It's a Whitley Bay item, and I was just wondering if you might be able to find out from whoever has the information about the spend of each of those items on that line.
Okay, Chair, thank you for that. So with respect to the first inquiry, which is to do with the 2000 planning application, I understand that refers to environmental works, which was linked into the development of the Cobalt Business Park. What I will do for you, Chair, is that is one of the queries that I will take up with the environmental team to understand what the intention is with regards to the money allocated within that section. And the second query that has been raised by Councillor is that in relation to...
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. There's some on page 55, section 3, 106 monies, but they've got zeros in the actual amounts. And the other thing as well, in the last meeting, we're looking at ways of accelerating some of the older ones, because we have got like the one from 2000, 2002, anything else. Have any ways that, I know we've got the person in place now, but looking at any other ways to accelerate updates on this? Because obviously with the time and everything else, it seems to be going on and on and on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'm sure Cathy will keep me right on the sections which have the zero numeric in the field. My understanding is that if there's a zero there, then there are no financial contributions for that. But again, Cathy might want to jump in on that one. With regards to making sure that we can accelerate the work, yes, indeed. What we are doing at the minute is, through the appointment of the new officer, we are working through the programme to ensure that all of the Section 106 contributions that have been received and have been identified to be spent are identified, and they are actually aligned with our ambition and the priorities across North Tyneside. What we also want to do, Chair, is to make sure that we maximise the Section 106 monies. So if there's any opportunity to use the Section 106 monies in lieu of council contribution, that would be something that the team will look at as well, to ensure that we can maximise the benefit right across the borough.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd echo the concerns about the delay in using some of this money. In the introductory part of the briefing note, it says that the idea of this is that they are getting the payments, the council is getting the payments to make a proposal acceptable, something that would not otherwise be acceptable. So I do find it very surprising that there was nothing lined up, nothing specifically in mind when these payments were sought. I wonder how the calculation was made and why particular sums were sought if there wasn't anything specifically lined up on which to spend it. Yes, there might be a comment on that perhaps, although I appreciate it's not a planner. Secondly, on page 7, section 3, health, there is nigh on £600,000. It says the programme manager continues to work with the NHS CCG locally. How long has that work gone on? We're often told that the NHS needs more money, yet this money is sitting here. And again, what was it designed for when it was sought? Why is this work taking such a long time? I'll give all my questions in one go, Chairman, if I may.
Can I just, Councillor Wells, can I just paraphrase your first two, because your line wasn't awfully clear? So if I say it back, can you tell us if I'm wrong? So your first question was, on what basis were the amounts generated if we haven't or had a plan to spend them? On what basis they were generated, because we should have had a plan to spend them in the first place. The second question was, health still seems to be a bit of a problem of spending the money. You have a project plan in place to start spending it, but it still doesn't seem to be moving very fast. What are we going to do to expedite that? Would be my summary of what you just said. Is that fair, a fair summation?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
Councillor,
that's fine.
going to go to your next question.
Thirdly, section 5 on page 8, the flow sites, 5-year investment plan, appendix 6. Where is appendix 6, please? Because I don't seem to have one.
In reference to a missing appendix. There's no appendix 6 in your pack.
And then finally, Chairman, I'm going to be parochial too. The 5-year investment plan on page 75 refers to St Mary's, Ersdon Village and Castle Park. And I wonder if officers could give me some information about what is intended on both of those, please. That's it, thank you.
Yep. You would like further information on the ward of St Mary's on page 75. Sorry, I'll just keep reiterating because your line is a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah, there's two mentioned, Ersdon Village and Castle Park.
Castle Park and Ersdon Village. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Over to you, Ian, for those 3 questions. Or maybe 4.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the first one, I'll go in reverse, if I may. So the information on St Mary's and Castle Park, the ward, Ersdon Village, I will speak with the relevant team member, and then what I'll do is I'll provide that information direct on those specific projects. So I shall follow that through. Appendix 6, which is the place sites, certainly the appendix was provided, so if that's not available to Councillor Wallace, then I can work with the team to make sure that that's provided as quickly as possible.
Absolutely, great.
With regards to health, we have had some challenges with working with our health colleagues. There has been a change in personnel within the health team, and they have recently now appointed a new officer with a specific focus to pick up on Section 106 arrangements. The team, because of many issues associated with COVID, have not had the opportunity to dedicate any real time to this. But what they have said was that they recognise that there is money to be spent, just under £600,000, and they are now going to be working with the council's programme manager to identify a number of projects that need to be delivered, and that's something which will be done in consultation with our own Director of Public Health as well. So Wendy Burke will be part of those discussions. And the last question, which was the first one, was with regards to on what basis were the monies generated. So my understanding is that when we receive a planning application as part of the process, the arrangements involve a number of specialist officers across the council who have involvement in their specialist areas, and what they identify are a number of opportunities to invest in either specific projects or projects within the locality. Because I am involved in education, I look at education, sometimes what happens with education is, although we may receive an amount of Section 106 money, it is not always possible to spend that money in isolation, and then what we do is we look at some longer term developments for any school changes, any people movement, and any planned improvements in the area. So we do have a number of projects which are specific, and again, I can continue to work with the team to ensure that we deliver as quickly as we can. And what we will also do is to make sure that those priorities align with our ambition and the investment priorities of the Council Chair.
Okay. Councillor Wallace?
With regards to the last response, Chairman, I wonder if Mr. Bevan can assure us that now and in future there are more specific and detailed proposals for using this Section 106 money or civil money or whatever it is, under whichever heading it arrives, that there is a definite plan that will be progressed more rapidly so that we don't see these, in some cases, decades old pots of money sitting there. Thanks.
Yeah. So, Ian, that's just your confirmation that we've closed the loop on this as we move forward with new planning applications, that we have plans underpinned behind them and they're quite clearly traced through. So we
yes, Chair,
can
I can confirm, because we now have some new governance arrangements in place, which is in sight of cabinet members and heads of service. That is something which will be followed through. I can confirm.
Brilliant. Okay. Are there any more questions? I must say, I think I found this really. I find these tables of allocated money really useful with the planning application numbers written in front of them, because I was about to ask a really daft question about building on Scaffold Hill. Then when I looked it up, I realised it was actually for an extra additional bit that they've put an extra bit of planning application in for, which is why there isn't the payments being made, because they haven't built that little slither of land. But there was one which I was a little bit confused on, was just the car park of Mallard Way Silverlink Retail Park, which is on our big pages. I can't find the page number now. Oh yeah, I highlighted it. There we go, page 62. It's in the pipeline monies piece. I couldn't understand how that land hadn't been completed or prior to completion is what it says in the notes. Now, if I think of it as the right bit of land and I couldn't get the map to load for that one, I think that's now being used, but potentially I've got the wrong piece of land.
Okay, Chair, what I can do for you, because if that's a pipeline project, that's probably still sitting with the planning authority, and okay, it may be that nothing's been concluded. So again, I can seek clarification for you on that point and get that set.
You wouldn't mind that? That'd be grand. Thank you. I managed to self deal with some of them. The play sites one didn't quite render in a easy to read format on our pieces of paper, but I'm sure if I reread that online, it'll make more sense. Is there any more questions on this section? No? Okay. Obviously, done such a good job of explaining there's not loads of questions. So, can I ask members to note this report?
Agreed.
Awesome. Right, so at this point, I wish to thank members and officers of the public, officers and members of the public watching the live stream, and announce the next Finance Subcommittee meeting will take place at 6 p.m. on the 9th of February 2021. And we're about to move into a closed session. Give me a second where that is. So at this point, can I ask, and move on to item 8, and ask the members to turn on your microphones and agree to pass the exclusion resolution for agenda item 9, as it contains information exempt from the public domain.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. As that resolution is now passed, the live stream will now be switched off to enable the final item of business to be concluded in private.